Today, we're going to be talking about Russell Brand, or at least the trajectory that Russell Brand has really gone on. Because a couple of years ago, we're talking what, 2014, 2013, roundabout there, Brand was slowly moving from this entertainment personality that he was, very much adapting into still being that comedian, but he was moving more and more into the world of politics. He was talking more about politics on his channel, talking more about political things when he was tweeting. And that, in a way, to some extent, was pretty good. Brand had a massive following. And just as we've discussed very recently with Jeremy Clarkson, agree or disagree with him, Clarkson becoming a potential spokesperson for British farming wouldn't actually necessarily be a bad thing. Like I say, take Nigel Farage in the fishing industry. The farming industry could do a lot worse. Again, see the example of Nigel Farage in the fishing industry. But for Brand, he's had a far more interesting trajectory, shall we say. Back in 2014, I made a video criticizing Russell Brand at that moment in time because he was very heavily advocating all these things, talking about all this, political stuff and the solutions and how we could solve them. And he was having like conversations because, again, Brand is sort of a big name, so he could reach out to these people and have conversations with them. But the worrying thing he was advocating, certainly back in 2014, was for some bizarre reason, even now, I would still heavily criticize him for that, but we'll get into obviously his transition later. He was saying young people shouldn't vote, and at the time, and even now, that was such a dumb statement, an incredibly dumb statement to make. But I will give him credit for this. In 2015, when it came around to that general election, Russell Brand interviewed Ed Miliband. Whether he reached out to Ed Miliband or Ed Miliband reached out to Russell Brand, I don't know. But nevertheless, this was actually a really good point. It was actually a very good move. If it certainly came from Ed Miliband, it was an amazing move because, again, he really did manage to galvanize at that point a big, massive youth vote turnout for him. At that particular general election, it wouldn't be beaten until, of course, the sort of the Corbyn years. So him reaching out to Brand, and Brand even saying that actually no, he would now vote for Labour, and actually advocated for then people to know you should actually now start to vote, was a good turnaround. So it just goes to show you Brand can maybe at least change. But that was 2014, 2015 Russell Brand, because now we have to talk about 2023 Russell Brand and the difference between where he was in about 2015 to where he is now is wildly different. But before we go talking about that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button because it does help out massively, very much the channel. And the hope is that maybe we can reach out to some of those Russell Brand, fanatics, and at least maybe bring them over to, talking some, sensible politics. I don't know. Maybe, Russell, if you ever see this, I'd love to have a conversation with you. I would genuinely, absolutely love to have a conversation with you. I think it would be absolutely fantastic. Maybe you can come and join me one of my good morning walks where we walk about in the field. Of course, it's a bit snowy today, but hey, if you're up for something like that, like I say, get in contact with me. I would genuinely love to have a talk with you. And that is serious. Regardless of what I'm about to say and the criticism I'm about to lay against you, I would still love to have a talk with you. I'm very much open to that. But anyway, that's another point. But anyway, yes, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, remember to share it with Russell Brand if you have the opportunity. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, more up-to-date link where you can buy me coffee, the Pony Club, and of course, the YouTube thank you button. So let's move on. So It is so. Yeah, we've got to talk about this Russell Brand because I think that the Russell Brand of the past is very, very much very different, and even to a point where Russell Brand is openly mixing in a way that Alex Jones used to do. He used to talk a bit about news, and then out of nowhere, woof, in comes the conspiracy theories. You've got the whole Netherlands farmers that he was very much big on. And remember, that movement or that move by the government was to try and limit the emissions that were coming from cattle farms to fit, European laws. So they were trying to sort of, stop them using fertilizer at that time, or at least fertilizer that would contribute to more of these emissions. That would be good for the environment, which would ultimately be good for the farmers further down the line. So he's very much gone into these conspiracy theories. He was massively with, if you may remember, the Canadian trucker protests organized by a very, very right wing faction in at that time in Canada. But he was all for them, repeating their lines that, oh, they were just trying to fight for their freedoms against, the vaccines. But of course, at that time, the vast majority of truckers were all fully vaccinated. They were essentially protesting about nothing. And again, these protests were very, very much whipped up by the right wing. Remember, the trucker unions in Canada were actively against these protests and warning them multiple times, do not take part in these protests, because the people who are organizing these protests, the people who are really speaking at them, have some pretty far right views. And one of the things that Brand does still today, he was on, I think it was the Bill Maher show over in America very recently. He went after so the question I think was asked about Fox News, and he said, "Oh yeah, well Fox News is really bad, but you know who else is bad as well? MSNBC. They're just as bad." And he's just like, this is exactly the same stuff that Alex Jones has gone onto. He has a massive audience, and it is really worrying that he parrots the conspiracy theories about, ivermectin, again, the protests about the farmers in the Netherlands, the trucker stuff. He still says that Monsanto is still some sort of threat, but Monsanto has not existed since since 2018. And yet he still goes on and on about them. And the worrying thing is that, as we said, just as Alex Jones did, he talks a bit of truth. Yeah, we should tax the rich, but you know what? Who we should be careful of? The globalists and the elites. Never really saying who they are, but it very, very much does come into the exact same type of conspiracy theories that we see on the right. And this is where Brand becomes, going from someone who was back in sort of, again, 2014, 2015, back in that point, was a good voice for political engagement, for for the youth, getting them energized and getting them out to sort of vote, has now become a voice of, unfortunately, modern political politics, and unfortunately not the good modern political politics that we would want to see at least develop, very much the bad kind of, you can't trust politicians, you can't trust mainstream news, you can't trust anyone but me because I'm the only one speaking the truth. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is probably how Russell Brand is now on a very much a very big trajectory to become someone like, or at least the big replacement to someone like David Icke, Alex Jones, and now capture, and unfortunately capture a very big, large portion of people and pull them into this idea that you cannot do anything, and that becomes a very bad message, because Russell Brand went from you should not vote to you should vote to now there's no point in voting at all because everything is really controlled by these secret cabals of globalists. And he's almost come full circle at this point. in a very weird way, but he is gone back to that stage of you should not vote. Now, at that time, it was very different reasons he was advocating not voting, but they've had reasons he's advocating voting for now were are even more crazy than certainly Brand was advocating back in 2013, 2014. So yeah, the trajectory of that Russell Brand has gone on has been wild and crazy. Unfortunately, something we really got to push back on if we want to have people actually engaged in politics, because it's people like Brand who turn people off from politics and engaging in policies and in meaningful discussions about actual politics and policy. So, as always, thank you very much for listening. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe. And of course, Russell, if you're watching, hey, get in contact with me. Would love to have a conversation with you at some point. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.